So before we started working together, what was going on for you personally?
I think the biggest challenges were not so much with people outside of my close relationship. So my family, for example, my wife in particular, that was becoming a challenging relationship. And I think in the main because I she was pointing out things that, were not right with me in terms of particularly around emotions. The fact that I was potentially emotionally stunted, in that I didn't have a connection with any emotions. When I thought about that myself, I couldn't really connect with feelings as such. So it was difficult for me to express, any view of how I felt or what I felt or where I was emotionally. And like anyone, from a male point of view, it was like you kind of keep those internally. I didn't want to
Mm.
burden other people with any issues that I had. Yeah, I really managed those myself and I kept those internally. What I didn't realize is potentially that was what was causing the problems or the issues where
Mm.
having to deal with not only my issues but also my wife's, and understanding where she was coming from and where her emotions were coming from. Because I was trying to look at it from my perspective, it was like, well, what's her problem, what's the issue, why has
Mm.
she got such a big beef about this? I mean, let's just deal with it and move on. So I couldn't connect with that. I couldn't relate to that in a way that was positive for our relationship. So yeah, so I think that's where, that's kind of really why I thought this was at least something I needed to try or have a go at, because ultimately, if I didn't, that would probably be the end of the relationship. So I was seeking a way to try to explore, is there something I need to fix, or am I that balanced person that I think I am?
Mm.
So that's really what got me involved, or got me into it, and that's
Mm.
why I made the decision to take this journey.
Yeah. Well, thank you for doing the work that you have been doing. I think it's really incredible. What was that final trigger point that allowed you to say yes in doing this work, going on this journey for you and, by the sounds of it, your family?
I mean, ultimately, it was the potential, breakup of not just my marriage but my family. So I have a daughter, 15, so quite a vulnerable age, I guess, emotionally. I have a wife who, we've been married for what was it, 20 odd years now. Yeah, it hasn't been good for a long, long time, but it was more the fear for me of, somebody else stepping into my shoes, and then how would I be able to deal with that? So my immediate reaction is, I guess it's that internal process again of trying to deal with it. My initial reaction is, fine, if it happens, it happens, so be it. But I'll just disappear, or I'll go elsewhere. I'll distance myself from the situation, so I don't have to see that maybe that other person, should that ever happen, it may not, but should that's obviously the thought that you have, is that somebody else is going to come in and do a better job than you, and all of a sudden, your wife is having a better life with somebody else, and your daughter, sees more in somebody else, and then that's quite a heavy pain to take. So it was really, that was kind of the force that pushed me into, making this call, making this decision. But I think equally at the same time, yeah, I needed somebody who, like yourself, and I felt, over the time we had connected, is that somebody who would be, truthful and honest, and challenge me, not pat me on the back and say, like, I've gone to counselors where I just always felt that they just told you what you wanted to hear.
Mm.
They appeased you in the situation you were in and said, yeah, look, you're all doing great. Just go away and talk. Yes, it might have been part of the solution, but it didn't solve the underlying issues. So I needed somebody to dig a little bit deeper into the root of it and start to pull that out and challenge that, and not fluff over it and tell
Yeah.
me I'm brilliant, I'm great, and everything's good, because clearly that's not the case.
Then what changes did you first notice early on once you did make a start in the program?
Probably two things. One is that I did have, because I did have a little bit of insight into how this was potentially maybe going to work. So I kind of thought I knew some of it, and I knew where things would go. When we started to do some of the workbooks, it does get you to start to think and to look a little bit deeper into, particularly the emotional elements of where you're at. It was a challenge to do the workbooks, but I would do them. I found was being challenged back to go even deeper or into the next level. And I'm sure we didn't go right to the full depths of it. But you kind of think you've answered it and you've got the answer and you know what the answer is. But then there's a different slant on it. And then all of a sudden, okay, hold on. I need to think about that differently all of a sudden. So the challenge is to, providing you go in with an inquisitive mindset, is to always think, oh, okay, I didn't think of it that way. Maybe I need to think a little bit more in this way. And so it was that really in the early stages was starting to sort of push the boundaries a little bit, or to dig deeper. And that's where I think the initial and actually I found it quite interesting, but also exciting to a certain degree, is that you're starting to realize things that maybe you didn't before. But
Mm.
equally, it's also a welcome question. Although there might be some uncomfortable discussions and uncomfortable points of view, it does actually open up a thinking. It becomes interesting in that respect. If you're inquisitive about it, if you're genuinely interested in trying to understand it a bit more. So that was, I think, the certainly from the early stages, and still now. I mean, you can always go more and more and more. And it
Mm.
is, when we started, was, oh yeah, okay. It's kind of those mini light bulb
Mm.
moments of, ah yeah, okay, I didn't think about it that way. Well, maybe if I look at this, and then you kind of go down that journey for a little bit, and then there's another mini light bulb moment, and then it's that kind of thing. It is a journey, uh, but you need to be inquisitive about it. You need to be able to embrace it, and yet there are uncomfortable truths that you have to own up to and face up to. But as long as you take them with some interest in terms of inquiring in yourself, then it does actually make it interesting.
So good. I love this. Well done. What feels most different now that you've completed this program, you've been on the journey, continuing on the journey? What feels most different now in your life, in your relationships, and maybe most specifically within yourself?
I think at this stage the difference is within myself. Now, I have changed my environment, so that may have a factor in it. But I think for me, it's really finding a level of contentment almost in, just where I'm at, what I'm doing, how I'm going about what I'm doing, and just finding just a little bit of positivity or joy in small things each day, and just, like for example, take the dog out for a walk, and we talked about, I walk on across a golf course as part of the walk, and
Mm.
I've been fortunate enough, the weather's been pretty good, but we have had good and bad days. But just a simple thing like talking to the dog, or finding golf balls that, and just that becomes a little bit of a game or a challenge or whatever, and that just starts off the day on a positive. Meeting people, while in a positive frame of mind, or a happy feeling. I know happy isn't probably the right term, but it's more of a, you feel that sort of warmer feel to yourself, and that little bit of joy that's in there. Just taking it from the surroundings, what's happening, the view, the birds singing, these kind of things. And then you bump into a total stranger, and you have, a 1 minute, 2 minute conversation of a hello, good morning, or a smile as you go past, or taking more pleasure in those types of things just gives you that warmer feeling, that better feeling. And then, that sustains you through the day, because it keeps you on that treadmill where, the next encounter is a positive one, and so forth and so forth. So yeah, I think that's been a big positive for me in terms of,
Mm.
what I've noticed.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing. I think that's wonderful. Finding the simplicity or the simple things in life and finding joy and happiness and the warmth within those things. It's so cool. Thank you so much for sharing. What would be an insight or a piece of advice that you might share with someone that is where you were maybe before you started?
I think this is, to go back to the point that this is a journey. It is genuinely a journey. You start off somewhere. We looked at, where do we want to be in 3 months, 4 months time. That was a difficult question, as to where you actually want to be, because to a certain degree, you don't really know. Kind of have an idea of what you might want to achieve. But I think ultimately, going back to the very start of that, it is important to have a direction, where you want to get to, and have that understanding of why you want to be there. But I think for me, that it's the journey along the way that's important.
Mm.
And I think, like any journey, you can either, you can get out your map, you can sit down and you can go, right, I want to go from A to B, and you can work it out yourself and do whatever. But as part of that journey, you don't have a local knowledge of the area that you might be in. And so you'll just go through that from A to B. And as far as you're concerned, you've achieved it, you've seen everything, it was all great. But actually, what you're potentially missing along the way is, the local knowledge, the local hotspots, the things you want to go and see. And I think for me, that's where the coaching element comes in. So it's like how almost having your guide to take you through that journey. And it's like, if you get to a village, for example, on your journey, and you just see what's on the surface and you move on to the next one, you've missed so much potentially in there. And that's where the coaching or the guide starts to dig a little bit deeper. So going back to my point about challenging my understanding of my emotional state, or what do I mean when I say I'm happy, or what do I mean when I say I'm finding joy in something, or what do I mean when I'd say I'm sad, and is it okay to be there? So
Mm,
for me, the coach takes you you know on that journey, but opens up a lot more of the possibilities along the journey as well. And yeah, ultimately you will eventually reach your goal, your end goal, but you'll be there as a different you know person, and then it's where you go from there. So for me, I think the difference between taking that journey on your own and trying to work your way through it, and then having a coach or a guide to take you through is just, it's two different worlds. It's really, you can miss so much and think you've achieved it all, but actually you didn't really see the whole thing. And
mm,
that's where that challenging, that digging deeper, that going into deeper depths, that opening up the inquiring mind in terms of what more is there. I think that's for me the key and the golden piece to the whole thing. That if
mm.
somebody is looking at doing this, that's the reason I would go down a sort of coaching route. Whereas before, I would have said I don't see why I need it. It's not for me, and so forth. So
Thank you so much. It's absolutely true. I really look forward to seeing where it is that you take this even further in your life and the ripple effect that it has on others around you as well. Thank you so much for sharing everything that you have.
no, thank you. I mean, as I said, it is the support and the guidance and the effort, and really about, it's ultimately doing it for yourself to have that positive influence to those that you are closer to or have impact with on a day-to-day basis. So no, look, thank you for your time and insight, and being the person, as I said, that is challenging, and not just letting it rest and saying, oh yeah, okay, that's okay. It's not, no, what's what's the next level, what's the next level, and so thank you for that as well. I appreciate that.
Yeah, you're so welcome. So welcome.